Hey, DawgNation, I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. I cannot tell you how much fun it is to be back. I'm so happy to start this new week off. Can't wait for the Peach Bowl on Friday. Really looking forward to watching this Georgia team play again after the run they've been on to close out the regular season. So many of you have been so nice to me. I'll share more thoughts about that before we're done, but just thank you for welcoming me back. Thanks for allowing me to be away the last couple of weeks and just really ready to get things going here today. John Stinchcomb later on, a bunch on everything happening around UGA. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I will share some brief thoughts later on my absence and everything that's gone on over the course of the last couple of weeks. But let me just begin by saying thank you to so many of you for being so kind to me through social media and everything else over these last 2 weeks while I have been gone. I have really felt the love of DawgNation, and I really appreciate that. And I am raring to go and so excited about today's show all week and the new year that is to come in 2021. With that said, let me begin this way. I think that one of the things that sports fans do, and the media that serves those sports fans, we just have a tendency to speak in comparisons. This player reminds us of that player, this game, scenario, storyline, what have you. It reminds you of something that's happened in the past. And I think that for Georgia's game against Cincinnati coming up on Friday in the Peach Bowl, there's a little bit of that too with the, we've seen this before. This is the big bad SEC team turning up its nose, looking down on the middling group of five team Cincinnati, and that's the dominant narrative that some people in the media would kind of suggest is what exists for the Peach Bowl on Saturday between the Bulldogs and the Bearcats. It feels like something we've seen before with an SEC team thinking that the group of five team, the lesser opponent, doesn't really belong on the same field. I'm going to give you some examples of kind of how that's being pushed heading towards this week. And when I say it's being pushed, I don't mean like nefariously. I don't think anyone's trying to, do anything, to harm Georgia or to mock Cincinnati here. I just think it's just a human tendency to kind of treat this game like other SEC versus groups of five in the past. I'm going to give you some examples of how that's being pushed, and I'm also going to try to explain why I don't think that narrative really works all that well for Georgia in the Peach Bowl against Cincinnati coming up on Friday. Let me start. Chris Doering, I would say good analyst for the SEC Network, with a little bit of a warning to the Georgia Bulldogs the other day about be careful getting ready for Cincinnati. This is what Doering said about that.
Think about Auburn playing UCF a couple years ago. We're completely not into playing that game at all. I think there's a motivating factor, a chip on the shoulder of these group of five teams, dating back to Boise, where you got to be there a couple times to prove your worthiness. It happened, again, as I talked about with UCF, and now Cincinnati. Feels like they should have been considered for the college football playoffs. Never really were given a chance. So if Georgia doesn't come locked in, they could get embarrassed on a big stage.
So, Doering says, hey, be careful that you're not into this game the way that Auburn might have been a couple of years ago against UCF. Be careful that you're locked in because you might get embarrassed otherwise. I really have no idea what Cincinnati's chip on the shoulder might be, what their feelings might be about the game one way or another. But I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that the fear of Georgia not being locked in is unfounded. And the idea that they're not, quote, into the game, I think that's probably lacking evidence as well. In fact, you have evidence to the contrary, possibly. Last night, Georgia released a video, and when Georgia does these kinds of things, a lot of this is typically intentional. Most people kind of gravitated towards, I think, what Georgia wanted you to see, which is that safety senior leader, Richard LeCount, who's been out the last few games because of the horrific accident that he was a part of, and you remember that. He has been trying to come back, and we got photographic video evidence of just how hard he's trying. I'll show you this on the screen for those of you who are watching on video, that in the video itself, LeCount is seen practicing. The best you can tell from a short clip, it looks like he's practicing like anybody else is. And LeCount himself on Twitter said, shh, basically, kind of giving the secret sign of, hey, don't tell people how hard I'm actually working here. But the point is LeCount coming back for a game like this is not the kind of thing that would be happening for a team that's, quote, not into the game or not locked into the game. That's just not quite the way any of this would go down. Now, we'll get into the opt-outs later on and kind of what that means. But the bottom line here is that when it comes to Georgia's focus for the game, the presence of a guy like LeCount at practice would seem to suggest that Georgia's heading in the right direction. Let me show you something else here for a moment. Harry Lyles Jr. is a writer for ESPN, and when he was previewing the Peach Bowl on the pages of ESPN.com, this is what he said about the dominant narrative, at least that he sees in the game heading into Friday, that the disrespect that's felt by Cincinnati. This is going to be a gigantic narrative, Lyles writes, by the time this game kicks off. Now, with all due respect to the ESPN writer here, I don't see how that's going to become a gigantic narrative. First of all, this is not the way Georgia players and coaches talk. When was the last time in their public words prior to any game they've disrespected any of their opponents? They've had plenty of chances to do so. I remember a little bit of stuff before the Notre Dame game, maybe in 2017, but for the most part, this is not a Georgia team that talks big and bad about any team that it plays. As Kirby Smart has said in the past, the Dogs, for the most part, are content to do their talking with their helmets. That's just been kind of the way the program kind of goes about its business. But beyond that, did you watch, and if you go to the DawgNation YouTube page, you can see this for yourself. Did you watch the press conference that Kirby Smart and Cincinnati coach Luke Fickell did together a couple of days ago, kind of the initial press conference previewing the Peach Bowl? So you've got all these reporters as a part of that on a video teleconference. The first three questions in that press conference, I know this is kind of media inside stuff, but I think it's evidence that backs up the point that I'm trying to make here. The first three questions on this press conference were all national reporters, and they were all for Luke Fickell. In a lot of ways, Georgia's the other team in this game. This isn't about big bad Georgia taking on a Group of Five team. This is about Cincinnati, who some in the media think should have been in the college football playoff, getting a chance to prove how good they really are. If anything, you could make a case that Georgia is the team that ought to have a chip on its shoulder, just given the fact that the media, I think, is more interested in the Cincinnati part of this than they are the Georgia part of this. The idea that Cincinnati's feeling some great level of disrespect, I would say, based on the early build-up for the game, that Cincinnati is getting a great deal of attention. But then there's this. Another guy from the SEC network, Gene Chizik, striking a similar tone to what you just heard from Chris Doering a moment ago. Chizik goes as far to say that he views the Peach Bowl for Georgia as potentially a no-win situation. I don't agree with this, but I want you to hear it nonetheless. Here's Gene Chizik.
It's almost like a no-win situation, right? If you beat Cincinnati by 2 touchdowns, that's what you were supposed to do. If you don't, you're the GOAT, right? They just finished their season on a big-time up note with a 49-14 win over Missouri. 3-game winning streak, the chance for them to win a 4th game in a row. Oh, and by the way, beat a top 10 team. That should be motivation in itself.
We should point out that Chizik's use of the word goat there is its old school vernacular. The idea of wearing the goat horns or being embarrassed, not the capital G, capital O, capital A, capital T acronym of greatest of all time. That's more of an old school usage of the word goat there. But as far as the game itself being a no-win situation for Georgia, I don't think that's true at all. I don't know. I mean, and this is for me a big change, because I went back and listened to an old version of DawgNation Daily, at least some audio from an old DawgNation Daily from a couple of years ago, and kind of getting ready for today's show. After the Texas loss in the Sugar Bowl 2 years ago, I brought on a lot of media types on the show at the time who said, this is no big deal for Georgia. Georgia's going to shake this off. This is not a real game. This is a glorified exhibition. Georgia's going to be fine in the future. And in fact, we had plenty of writers and former players, things like that on the show saying that Georgia was still in their mind a top 3, top 4 team for the following year, that they just weren't making that big of a deal about the Texas loss. And there were a lot of Georgia fans who felt very, very differently. A lot of Georgia fans were saying, BA, I don't want to hear that guy saying this game doesn't matter. I want my team to play better in bowl games. And I think what's interesting is that over the course of the last couple of years, I think the sport has kind of moved in the direction that fans kind of wanted it to be back in 2018 after Georgia had lost to Texas. I do think we're seeing, and maybe it's only going to last for a brief era, Maybe it's only going to, be a couple of years worth of evidence to support this, but I do think we're kind of living in a time now where these bowl games do seem to matter more at the end of one year for the following year. And in fact, Kirby Smart, to kind of piggyback off of what Gene Chizik just said, acknowledged that when he spoke to reporters a couple of days ago as well about what the value of this game can be for the following season. Smart on that topic.
It's almost like a no-win situation, right? If you beat
That's
Cincinnati
Chizik
by
again.
2 touchdowns.
Let's hear Kirby Smart here.
I think everybody tries to spin the bowl game as building momentum, and that's great. It 100% is an opportunity to build momentum. Everybody wants to talk about 2021 anyway. That's all a lot of teams want to talk about. Once you're not in the Final Four and you're not in the playoffs, I mean, that's what people are going to talk about. They're going to talk about the next season. They're going to gloom or doom. It's going to be way up here if you win, and it's going to be way down here if you lose. And the truth, as I always say, resides somewhere in the middle. It's an opportunity. It's a reward for our guys to go out and play a top 10 opponent, a team that has not lost a game all year. We want to go out and perform well. We want to perform our best. We want to play our best game.
Yeah, listen, when you hear Kirby Smart saying that, hard to imagine Georgia's going to somehow show up not ready to play or show up not respecting Cincinnati. And as I said before, the last couple of years, we've seen bowl games just matter more. The number one seed in this year's college football playoff is Alabama. Last year, Alabama played not just outside the college football playoff, but outside the New Year's Six. They played Michigan. They won that game. Mac Jones played well. It certainly seems that what happens for Alabama against Michigan has been a springboard for the success that team has enjoyed in 2020. Last year's national champion, LSU, go back and look at them at the end of the 2018 season, the season that preceded their national championship run, Fiesta Bowl win against UCF. LSU showed up ready to play, and somehow that seemed to carry on to the following season. Georgia's obviously hopeful the same thing is true for them this year. There is something to be gained for 2021 by Georgia going out and beating a top 10 team. But as Kirby Smart said, there's also something to be gained for how this team finishes in 2020 as well. So the notion that big bad SEC doesn't respect Cincinnati and doesn't want to be here, that may have been true for bowl games in the past. I don't think that's true for Georgia here in 2020 or what's about to be 2021 when this game is played. I think Georgia's ready to go, and frankly, I'm certainly ready to see it. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We are presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it is so good to be with you. No matter how you get to us today, live on video, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, we're on the radio, and it's good to be back with our friends in the Classic City again on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. What a thrill it is to be doing this show once again. Big thanks to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making it possible and for also allowing me to be away over the course of these last couple of weeks. And, of course, Pella can help you equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. And this time of year when that heat's running overdrive, obviously that really matters because it helps you keep the energy on the inside of your house. And that's a big, big thing this time of year. You don't want that heat escaping out the crevices of your windows and doors. You want it inside. It also increases the curb appeal of your home there as well. It's a family-owned and operated branch right here in Georgia, so you get the local service, but you also get the power and the resources of a nationally known company as well, and you get great savings as well. Between now and January 7th, you can get 50% off qualifying installations or no payments, no interest for 18 months. Great, great deal. Here's how you get in touch. A couple of different ways. Online, PellaBranch.com. That's PellaBranch.com. Or give them a call in their Dunwoody showroom at 404-445-2979. 404-445-2979. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. We're going to do John Stinchcomb here in a couple of minutes. We're going to do Around the Doghouse, assisted today by our friends at AAA. And by the way, my wife had to use AAA the other day, so this is truth in advertising. We really are AAA members, and proudly so. Let me just say this before we get to that, though. Some of you are aware of this, some of you are not. The reason why I've been off the air for the last 2 weeks is my father died, and it has been a hard time for my family, and there's so much I want to tell you about him. I think here's what I'm going to do, though. I think that when I post the podcast today at DawgNation.com, at the end of that post, I'm going to write a few words, things that maybe I just don't have time to say right now. I want to go into greater detail on because there is a lot I'd like for you to know about him. But let me just say this about me for a moment. For those of you who have been aware, who maybe follow me on Twitter, something along those lines, you have made this very easy to talk about. I really appreciate that. And over the years, I think we've kind of cultivated a situation here around Dog Nation, and maybe DawgNation Daily specifically, where talking about your family, talking about the things that matter to you beyond college football, that has been an easy thing to do because of the fact that I feel like we formed those kinds of relationships, and I'm very proud of that. Dog Nation's always been about more than just content. So let me just say this. Upon my return here today and looking back over the last couple of weeks, what has been really unlike anything I've ever dealt with before in my life, just thank you so much for just the affection you've shown to me and the care and concern you've shown for me. I'm really, really appreciative of that. And my dad, of course, loved Dog Nation. He loved the Georgia Bulldogs. He loved having fun. So with that in mind, let's honor him here a little bit when we have some fun. We'll go around the doghouse, as I said before. It's assisted today by our friends at AAA. And obviously one of the hot topics for Georgia right now, and I just talked about the level of motivation that I believe that Georgia has for this game, but there's also the concern of big number of players not playing, some opt-outs. And as you might imagine, Kirby Smart does not really want to talk about this very much. And I don't know, maybe this is just my twisted brain, but there was a degree in which Smart this week reminded me so much of the legendary coach of the New England Patriots, Bill Belichick. For those of you that follow the NFL at all, you know Belichick's kind of terse style with the media. And one of the most famous rants that Belichick has ever gone on as the coach of the Patriots was preceding a game against the Cincinnati Bengals, when reporters wanted to talk about one thing, but Belichick wanted to talk about something completely different. For those of you that don't know the On to Cincinnati rant from Bill Belichick, can we give people a taste of On to Cincinnati here?
What do you think having a 37-year-old?
We're on to Cincinnati. It's nothing about the past, nothing about the future. Right now we're preparing for Cincinnati.
Do you feel like the talent you have here is good enough?
We're getting ready for Cincinnati.
I'm just asking, do you think you've done enough to help Tom Brady?
We're getting ready for Cincinnati.
First of all, you kind of respect the reporter who kind of goes back at this 2 more times when Belichick keeps giving him the On to Cincinnati stiff arm. Now, listen, it remains to be seen if Kirby Smart as a coach will one day be thought of in the same lofty status, rarefied air that Bill Belichick has occupied for the New England Patriots. That's still a long way away from being proven true or not. But certainly this week, Smart seemingly took a step towards at least reminding me of Belichick, as he also tried to spin the narrative and move himself on to Cincinnati. So let me let you hear this mashup. A little bit of Belichick, a little bit of Kirby from his press conference the other night. You tell me how much Kirby Smart embodies the spirit of Belichick, as Kirby also was trying to be on to Cincinnati. Listen to this.
What do you think having a 37-year-old?
We're on to Cincinnati.
That's what we're excited about, moving on to Cincinnati.
It's nothing about the past, nothing about the future. Right now we're preparing for Cincinnati.
Like I said, I'm focused on Cincinnati, and COVID.
Do you feel like the talent you have here is good enough?
We're getting ready for Cincinnati.
I wanted to talk about Cincinnati tonight.
Do you think you've done enough to help Tom Brady?
We're getting ready for Cincinnati.
Moving on to Cincinnati.
So listen, I don't know. I mean, maybe one of these days Kirby will be a Belichick-style coach, but certainly he borrowed some of Belichick's style with that. And, of course, on a more serious point in all of this, we do know that Eric Stokes is not going to play in the game on Friday. Smart has confirmed that. Sounds like Monty Rice, Trey McKitty won't be playing either. Ben Cleveland not going to be playing. Jermaine Johnson has announced his transfer. We'll do more on that later on the show. And, of course, Trey Hill is injured. On the serious front, Smart did kind of push back on the notion that we might fixate too much on these names with all the guys who are playing. And I thought it was at least worth hearing the serious side of this from Smart. Here's Kirby once again.
I'm really worried about the guys that are here, not the ones that aren't. And that's my focus. For whatever reason, everybody wants to write the story about the ones that aren't, but really the focus and attention should be on the ones that are. I don't know if you guys know, you could probably look down the list and see, but of the first 64 players picked last year in the NFL draft, there were only 6 that didn't play in their bowl game, if they had a bowl game. It's not necessarily the modern thing or the trend to do that. I think people make it out to be that way, but that's not actually true. A lot more played than didn't play, and it'll be the same way this year.
So listen, that's a pretty obscure stat just to have floating around your brain. It's the kind of thing that you only look up if you are at least a little bit concerned about what might be a bit of an opt-out trend. But as far as the players missing this game for Georgia, it doesn't make me any less excited to watch the game. Frankly, I'm excited about watching the guys who may get a chance to play more. I thought Connor Riley had a great story about that at DawgNation.com this week, that for everybody who's not playing, there's also someone else who gets to play more than he's played in the past. I don't quite know what you do about this. I guess I have some thoughts and ideas, maybe more complicated, that can be expressed in the limited window we have right here. But ultimately, I think Smart's at least right when he says that the presence of some opt-outs for Georgia, I don't think changes the overall theme of the game for this upcoming Friday. It's Around the Doghouse. It's delivered today by our friends at AAA. And I said before, this is truth in advertising. A couple of days ago, right before Christmas, my wife called me in a little bit of a panic. The car wouldn't start. Now you got all these, gifts and things like that in the back of the car, and I'm way over here, she's way over there, and we had to reach out to AAA, and we had to get AAA on the phone and get them to come over and pick her up and get the car towed. We use that. That's what we do. It's one of the reasons why I love being a AAA member. Not only do they save you kind of some peace of mind, but they also can save you some money as well when it comes to the AAA Savings Hack Pack. It's a a collection of benefits worth over $1,000, including career assistance, identity theft protection, up to 85% off prescriptions, discounts on food and essentials, and it's a part of every AAA membership. And as I said before, it's free. So check out AAA.com/Go Savings. It's AAA.com/Go Savings, and you can get the AAA Savings Hack Pack as a part of your AAA membership. All right, before we're done, as I said before, I'll do more on the situation involving Jermaine Johnson. I'll preview Brock Vandegrift in a state championship game here today. It's busy around Dog Nation, and it's great now to get a chance to speak to our buddy John Stinchcomb. Let's do that right now as a part of a Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And it's so great to speak to John Stinchcomb again as a part of a Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. John, fun to get a chance to talk to you. I know you're like me, looking forward to seeing these dogs play again. For some Georgia players, the final time in a Georgia uniform coming up this Friday against Cincinnati. But before we get to that, there's also the issue, and I was just playing some audio from Kirby Smart on this topic, the players who won't be playing, the opt-outs that are taking place. And we may not know all of these. Smart did confirm some of them. You've expressed some concern about this in the past. What do you think about the players that won't be playing for Georgia and the larger trend? And I think there is a little bit of a trend on this, even though Smart kind of seems to differ on that opinion. The larger trend of this may be in college football. What do you think about this?
Candidly, I despise it. I don't understand. I think it's a gift that we give players to use the term opt-out, because you'll have to explain to me what the difference between an opt-out is and just quitting on your team. I mean, your team is still playing football. They're not done. There's one game left. And for all these players that are citing, I'm trying to prepare for the NFL draft, what do you mean? You're not talking about risk of injury at practice or games, because there's a number of players that are signed up to play in the Senior Bowl. So it's not out of fear of injury. It's not. What is it? Other than just saying to your teammates, to the rest of the team, you're not worth it. You're just not worth it. I don't want to continue playing with you anymore, which is, it baffles me. It really does. I may be sounding pretty strong in this category, but I don't get it, man. It frustrates me. Your team's still playing ball. A bowl game used to be an honor, something that, it's a reward for a season that was hard fought. And for Georgia, this is, it's a great opportunity to say, we didn't hit our goals, but man, we're a good football team. And there's a number of leaders that wore C's on their chest, meaning that they were captains, that have said, you know what, I'm done. You can't offer me anything else. So it's about as selfish a decision as you can make, and it sounds rough, but explain to me how it's anything other than just a misguided, selfish decision that says to the rest of the team, you're not worth it.
Yeah, listen, I'm not surprised to hear you say that. You've expressed similar sentiment in the past. You've been very consistent on this topic. It's something that you've been very clear that you don't like. Let me ask you this, whether it be for Georgia or, like, say, a program like North Carolina, which has not been to a game like the Orange Bowl in a long time. They've had a ton of opt-outs. I know their game for Texas A&M. There's a lot of programs beyond Georgia who are dealing with this. Do you think there's anything that can be done about this to incentivize, not doing this?
Yeah, well, I think administrations, organizations, coaches, they need to take some ownership and responsibility for creating the atmosphere that currently exists with bowl games, right? So if you don't make the college football playoff series, it's just been with coaches for a long time. They've already chosen to move on to different programs, and that kind of set the tone early on, right? So a coach that's fired or a coach gets hired into that space, and some stick around and finish out if they're a coordinator or if they're playing for something, and others just decide that they move on. Well, players have seen that for years. And I think administrations and organizations need to own the fact that that's the atmosphere. You've devalued college bowl games for a long time now, and players are starting to catch back up and say, well, if it's not of value to the coaches and to the administrations that are willing to make these decisions, then maybe there's something amiss. And so they're playing catch up a little bit. But what can be done? What does your scholarship say when you sign it? It's a contract, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I will do this if you do this. I will provide room, board, and education, and pay for all these things and more. These opportunities that are unique to a student athlete in exchange for you play for your team, your school. And when you stop honoring that contract, which is what these players are doing, you want to be treated like an adult, you want to make big boy decisions, great. Well, just know that you're in breach of contract. So you're going to have to pay for this semester and this food and all these things. And for some of these guys, it won't be a problem because they'll get drafted. But sadly, for the list of players that say that they're preparing for the NFL draft, brother, what are you talking about? You might have just missed your last opportunity to play a meaningful game.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about some preseason game. I'm saying something that you can hang your hat on and say that you were a vital piece. And this isn't, I'm on my soapbox, BA. You got me riled up. You pulled my string. But Georgia, this isn't exclusive to Georgia.
Sure.
Now, you look at the list, which I did this morning, and we've got arguably the most number of players that are opting out at this point in the season. Now, there's other programs that had it occur at the beginning of the season and so forth, but for the bowl game specifically, Georgia's list is noticeably longer than most.
Can I give you a sort of a harebrained theory about this? And I'm not saying if what I'm saying is right, it is just my opinion. I'm not saying it makes it better or worse, but it's my opinion nonetheless, that I actually don't think that if you got really truthful with some of the players, I don't think this is about fear of injury in a bowl game, and I actually don't even think this is really about preparing for the NFL. I think it's about practicing during the month of December, if I had to guess. Georgia practices are hard. A lot of college football practices beyond Georgia, they are really hard. You're essentially trading a month's worth of giving your time to the team for a chance to play in one more game. That it's somehow, if you kind of waved a magic wand and bowl games like the one that Georgia's playing in this week weren't January 1st, but they were let's just say week after the SEC championship game, week after that, but still before Christmas. I think you'd actually get more participation from more players across the country. I think what has kind of become a little hard on some of these players, and I said before, this is just my opinion, but I think what's become hard on some of these players is giving up that month of December to go play in this game when I actually have a chance to be kind of, free and on my own time and maybe be around my family again during the month of December. And while there's a part of me that agrees with some of what you say about the problems related to the opt-outs, there's also a part of me that understands that, hey, being home for Christmas as opposed to grinding it out for these practices for another month, I at least understand the gravitational pull towards that.
Yeah, well, if you want to play the game of football without sacrifice, you're in the wrong sport.
Well said.
And quite honestly, this year I understand that argument. I've experienced that very thing of a month of extra football, and practices are not always fun. Usually they're not. But this season, Georgia was slated to play through December 19th. So you're looking at 2 weeks of extra practice, and you're willing to sacrifice what you've built, what you've been a part of, for, call it at most, 10 practices? That seems pretty short-sighted to me. And, I've played on Thanksgiving. I've played on Christmas. And it's tough. And, those are sacrifices that you make. And holidays do look different. But that's no different. And for these guys that are saying, I would hate to think that a player wasn't hopefully opting out with ambitions to play in the NFL. Do you not think that the next level requires sacrifice?
Sure. I think that's...
I'm sorry.
No, I just think it's all well said, John. And I think for a lot of people, it's gratifying to hear a former player, share that perspective because, John, there are a lot of fans who, I think what it is maybe not so much frustration with any specific Georgia player, but a concern about a trend in the sport where, for those of us who love college football, we want everything related to college football to matter, and that's bowl games included.
Yeah, it's a devaluation of the game, and I'm talking about specifically the game of college football.
Yeah,
that what we've minimized college football to when we take this approach is it is purely a tool for a specific pool of players to launch their careers professionally. So you're minimizing it to a developmental league. It is a minor league system for the NFL. And if that's all it is to you, then these opt-outs, that becomes commonplace because all it is development. All you are is a tool for me to use to springboard to the next level to where I can get paid to do what I want to do. Now, maybe that's the case for a lot of folks, but it's not the case for some. And I would argue it's not the case for most, that college football is of value and that there are still players that go to specific places because they want to play for their team. I want to be a Georgia Bulldog. Now, yes, given the opportunity, if I can make a career out of this, I want to take it. But it is one aspect of why I want to play at Georgia. It's one aspect of why I want to take this next step as I leave high school, whether it's Georgia or anywhere else. And this isn't an exclusive issue that Georgia is dealing with. I think it's a across the nation issue. I don't want to call it a problem. I kind of see it that way, but it's not exclusive to Georgia. It's a mindset and approach.
No, I think that's all really well said, John. It's our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. As I said before, it's brought to you by our friends at Marlowe's Tavern. And Marlowe's got some great stuff as we head towards New Year's Eve coming up on Thursday, then New Year's Day coming up on Friday. Now, I will say this. I've been given this information about Marlowe's. You'll talk about respect for me that maybe I don't deserve. One of the things that Marlowe's has this upcoming week is some hors d'oeuvres heading to a New Year's Eve. Now, listen, the fact that they think I can even read the word hors d'oeuvres, look at the way it smells. I'm very happy to know that they think I can read the word hors d'oeuvres, but they do have them. And if you're watching a video, you see all the great things like warm brie fondue and the baked brie and crackers. Just some very, very good stuff. Smoked trout dip. So really, really good selections there for that hors d'oeuvres to enjoy with you and your family on New Year's Eve. Then how about a Marlowe's brunch on New Year's Day as well? Marlowe's is a lot of the various tavern locations and neighborhoods around Atlanta have had a great tradition of brunch as it is. New Year's Day brunch as well. Just going to be an incredible thing that you can order. You got to get your meal ordered by New Year's Day. That's 5 p.m. today if you want to get that ordered. 5 p.m. today for that. And you got to pick it up between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. on December the 31st. So marlowstavern.com, more to go about. That's where you should go to find out more about the hors d'oeuvres on New Year's Eve or the brunch order that you can make for New Year's Day and have that with your family right there at home. And don't forget, this opportunity is still there to buy the $50 gift card or $100 Marlowe's gift card and get that free bottle of bubbly complimentary from our friends at Marlowe's Tavern. So big stuff heading towards New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, marlowstavern.com for a lot more on that. John, let's shift gears here to the game itself on Friday, and I can say this with true authenticity that the players that are not playing for Georgia on Friday, that doesn't lessen my excitement for the game. I think this team finished the regular season. Unfortunately, it was the last game against Missouri, but they finished on a very high note. And really, this is a team playing pretty good football right now. That's been acknowledged by guys like Kirk Herbstreit and others. And frankly, John, I'm sure you feel the same way, I'm just really engaged by the chance to see this team play once again on Friday. I think that Cincinnati is a good team and a fun opponent. I'm really looking forward to this game. I'm sure you feel the same way.
And I do, and I think that's what is I'm going to try to focus on rather than the negativity of the players that are choosing to quit. So you look at this team, and there's so much to be excited about. JT Daniels has answered that lingering question mark that we've had since really the entire offseason, since Jake Fromm decided to leave, and especially since Jamie Newman opted out for the season, that God, who can be that guy? And man, has he stepped up! And you see the playmaking ability of this offense, and are encouraged by so many of these players that we're replacing some of the greats that we lost last year. And man, there's a lot to be excited about. I think this is more opportunity for some of these young players that you're starting to learn their names, you're starting to see what they can do, that this is obviously the personnel is so much different than what we've seen most of the year, but it's a great opportunity for these guys to put their stake in the ground and build for 2021, and also put a nice big fat bow on the end of this 2020 season that finished with two games that should have happened that didn't for them. Both Vandy games, depending on the week that you look at, was the anticipation to being able to play, and then that not happening. So to finish on a high note against a very capable and threatening Cincinnati team is something that should be of great importance for the guys playing this game.
I will finish with this. I mentioned this before you joined us, that the notion that this is big bad SEC team that doesn't have any respect for Cincinnati and kind of turns up its nose at the Bearcats, that has probably been true in bowl games before, and we can certainly probably cite some examples of that. But I don't get the sense there's any of that for Georgia-Cincinnati on Friday. First of all, Georgia's not really in the habit of disrespecting anyone. I think that, Alabama's bowl win last year, LSU's bowl win back in 2018 kind of shows you that those bowl wins can be a springboard towards success in the future season. The fact that Georgia's trying to get some injured players back and playing again, and, some guys that do have lofty draft status potentially appear to be trying to play in this game on Friday. I mean, I think that the notion that somehow Georgia is disengaged in this game, I don't think that holds up to close scrutiny. I think that Cincinnati will get Georgia's best shot on Friday. Do you agree with that?
I do, and I think there's two things that I appreciate and stand out to me. And the first is, during this Kirby Smart era, we don't have a lot of players making these mouthy comments about opponents. You're reading some of the stuff about Florida in anticipation of their game against Oklahoma, and it's disrespectful to their program. And we haven't seen much of that, or any of that, really, under Coach Smart. Not to say that we did before then, but I think it's noteworthy in today's game that there is a healthy respect for the opponents. I think the other thing that these opt-outs bring, and that Georgia has learned specifically, is and you hear Coach Smart in his comments, is we want guys playing in this game that want to play in this game. So if you have any trepidation, if you have any reservation that the opponent isn't worthy of your skill set, don't bother. We don't want you. Which I think is a good thing. You've kind of culled the herd to guys that want to play in this game and think that it is of their worth, that the opponent, the game itself, is worthy of them performing in it. And that's a good thing. So not once have I perceived or been able to intonate anything from this team other than a healthy respect of their opponent and this opportunity that the guys that are still in this locker room, that are still strapping up and going out to practice on a daily basis, are doing so with very purposeful intentions, if you will.
John, it is always great to get a chance to talk to you. I really appreciate that. I believe we're going to be back doing DawgNation Happy Hour this week. I'm looking forward to that. And just getting your insight on what's going on with the UGA. It's been too long since we've gotten a chance to chat. I'm glad we were able to rectify that here today. Hope you continue to enjoy your holiday season with your family. And as I said before, I'll look forward to getting a chance to speak with you very soon.
Always a pleasure, B.A. Go Dogs.
Good stuff, John.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Good stuff from John Stinchcomb. Man, really happy to get a chance to speak to him. And, you know, John probably feels a little stronger about the opt-outs than I do, but this is kind of always what we've done on the show. You know, I do not bring on people, guests, you know, things like that, to have them echo my point of view, as much as that might make my ego feel very good. I love the idea of bringing on a guest who might amplify a slightly different point than I make, or might, you know, in some cases take something in a completely different direction. I've never wanted, you know, this to be a monolith type show where my opinion is the only one that's ever going to get expressed. I like to share some of your opinions when you're kind enough to share them with me, and I would certainly want to give John Stinchcomb, especially, you know, given the gravitas that he has as a former great player at Georgia, you want to give him, you know, wide berth to share what he thinks about stuff like that. I think it makes the show better, and I think it makes all of us more informed when you hear the perspective of a former player like that. So very good stuff from John Stinchcomb all the way around. Speaking of good stuff, make sure you check out some Classic City Lager. Now, you're heading towards New Year's Eve. It's a great time to stay at home here this New Year's Eve and be close with your family and friends, and, you know, small intimate gatherings. So, of course, you know, respecting social distance, everything like that. Classic City Lager goes great with that. It's available in 6 and 12-pack cans. Wherever you like to do your shopping, you can pick up some Classic City Lager. It's a taste of Athens, but you don't have to be in Athens to get it. It is good, cold beer. It's a lager-style beer, which means it's a lighter beer, but there's, listen, no sacrifice in flavor there. So heading towards New Year's Eve, heading towards the big game on Friday, make sure you check yourself out some Classic City Lager. All right. There is a lot to mention on the SEC. Some of this is kind of a catch-up on some of what's gone on over the last few days. So let me just kind of run through all of this. Since we last spoke, South Carolina has hired Shane Beamer as its coach. Let me say this about Beamer quickly, and then I'll get to what the latest new news with South Carolina is after that. I have heard some people criticize the notion that Beamer, not a former coordinator, he was not an offensive or defensive coordinator at Oklahoma, not a former coordinator, kind of skipping the line to become a head coach here at South Carolina. I think that's probably a fair point to bring up. Now, that does not mean that Beamer won't be a good coach. John Harbaugh, as a for instance, in the NFL, was not a former offensive or defensive coordinator. He was a special teams guy, and he's gone on to win Super Bowl there with the Baltimore Ravens. So you don't have to be a former coordinator to be a good head coach. We've told a lot of people that you can't be a head coach until you are a coordinator. And somehow when you see Beamer maybe using the strength of his last name, Frank Beamer was obviously a legendary coach, it almost seems like that Beamer skipped a couple of steps here and maybe jumped the line a bit. And I do think that ought to put more scrutiny on his tenure at South Carolina. Is this just nepotism run amok? Or is this the kind of guy, because he is so deeply entrenched in coaching circles, who can hire better assistants and have better relationships and just run a program pretty effectively? He obviously knows South Carolina well, having been a former assistant with the Gamecocks there in the past. Speaking of assistants, they've made a bunch of announcements. Mike Bobo is coming back to lead the offense. Connor Shaw is going to be on staff now as one of their 10 true assistants, as opposed to kind of an off-field staffer the way that he was in the past. That would seem to keep them very much in play for Gunnar Stockton for the class of 2022. That's a quarterback battle worth watching. Of course, the Bobo offense this year, I don't know that Mike made a big impact on what happened there at South Carolina, but they are going to go back and do all of that again on the offensive side of the ball here for the upcoming year. They've also announced Will Friend. Friend's obviously, you know, close to Bobo. They worked together in the past at Georgia. Friend is leaving Tennessee to come to South Carolina. This is interesting for me on a couple of fronts. First of all, the Tennessee offensive line, you want to talk about position groups in this league that have underwhelmed in comparison to preseason expectations. I don't know how far in the past you have to go back to find a group that underperformed as much as this Tennessee offensive line did this year. This is not just Georgia fan poking at the Vols by saying this. We could bring on any number of Tennessee fans, and they'll tell you even more about how bad this offensive line was. So, the way this would normally kind of be viewed as like a major coup for, South Carolina to get Tennessee's offensive line coach, I don't quite know that this one's going to be spun that way. I think it's also interesting that a lot of these position coach moves in the SEC the last couple of years, I don't know that any of them have brought the fireworks they were supposed to. Charlton Warren comes to mind here. I think Warren's been fine defensive backs coach for Georgia, but I guess I probably thought it would end up being a bigger deal that Georgia got him from Florida. He's here now, and for the most part, he's just kind of fine. We haven't thought much about that since then. Some of the same stuff, Chaney going to Tennessee, things like that. Those moves within the league just haven't paid a huge number of dividends, but that's probably worth watching. Let me also say this about the Brian Harsin hire at Auburn. There was a very interesting article at AL.com the other day kind of chronicling how it came to be that Harsin became the coach at Auburn, leaving Boise State to do so. And it kind of reminded me, I'm going to sound like a dork here for a moment, but like the Roman emperors who would like have someone write their history for them. They were always kind of cast as the hero in their own story. The way this Auburn story is being spun is kind of the same kind of thing when it comes to Alan Green, the athletic director, and Jay Gouge, I believe you say his name, the Auburn University president, that they stood up to the boosters, they stood up to the board of trustees who somehow wanted Kevin Steele, the current the former defensive coordinator, to be Auburn head coach, and Green and Gouge stood up and finally put the Auburn boosters in their place. Something about that sounds a little too good to be true. Something like there's an element of that story that seems exaggerated. How much do people really want Kevin Steele to be head coach? We've been led to believe that there were key boosters who really wanted that to happen. Maybe that's true. The notion that Green and Gouge prevented that from happening, the inmates running the asylum, so to speak, the way that's maybe been true for Auburn in the past. Maybe that's what really happened. That seems like a pretty convenient narrative all the way around. Here's what I'll say. Auburn fired a coach who beat Nick Saban with regularity. He beat him in 19? He beat him in 17, beat him in 13. Gus Malzahn had a number of wins against Nick Saban. That is not an easy thing to do, and they have fired him, and they've replaced him with Brian Harsin. Now, Harsin was winning at Boise State, has a track record of success. But the chances of Harsin being better than Gus Malzahn, I would say, are not very good. So we shall see how that plays out. Doesn't mean that he can't succeed, but overall, maybe chances of success, maybe not all that great. There were a couple of other SEC stories I was going to talk about, but we're running a little late here, so I'll wait and do some of that later on. Let me instead get back to the topic of the Georgia Bulldogs here for a moment on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And one of the other big stories recently for Georgia has been the announced transfer of outside linebacker Jermaine Johnson, who is going to Florida State. And I'll show you what Johnson put out there on social media about that. An edit of himself in the Florida State jersey, essentially letting it be known that he was heading towards the Seminoles. This has largely been understood to be a situation where Johnson maybe doesn't like being a part of an ensemble cast at Georgia, very deep at outside linebacker, Nolan Smith, Azeez Ojulari, Adam Anderson, and others, that somehow that's too much shared playing time for Jermaine Johnson. He wants to go to a place like Florida State where he can be on the field every play, pass rush exclusively. Johnson was asked to do some things other than that here at Georgia, and he wants to go and kind of show what a star he can be in one more year in college football. And to be frank, I understand the temptation to want to do that. I do kind of get that, and I've expressed before about Georgia that one of the things that Georgia needs to be good at is taking these former elite recruits. Johnson was the former number one junior college player in the country when he came to Georgia, taking these guys and turning them into stars here at UGA. That's a concern I've expressed in the past. But let me say this, though, that we're about to see a move in this upcoming NFL draft that could very much validate the way that Smart has gone about his business with his liberal substitution policy and all the various guys he's got playing time for. Azeez Ojulari, I think some of the mock drafts I've seen have suggested that Ojulari could end up being drafted pretty high if he does indeed come out this upcoming year. And that's a guy who's also shared playing time, has not gotten the glory that maybe he could have gotten other places because some of that was going to Jermaine Johnson. There were times this year where I thought that Johnson may have been Georgia's best pass rusher, at least in spurts this season. Ojulari had to share time with Johnson, had to share time with Nolan Smith, who's, on the field, maybe not quite getting the stats that some of us thought that he would get. But if Ojulari, who's also a part of that same ensemble cast, if he goes on the NFL draft and gets drafted very high, Smart can say, see, this works. My system that asks players to share time and maybe get fewer stats here, they might get other places. It works. Ojulari's got himself a big check, signing bonus as a first-round pick, something along those lines. I think that the next couple of NFL drafts are going to be very interesting for Smart, potentially validating the fact that you may not get to go and rush the passer on every single play the way that you might get to go and do in other programs. But I can get you the NFL. I can get you paid. These next couple of NFL drafts are going to be interesting for Smart in that, and the Georgia program overall in terms of the ensemble cast of players at a lot of positions who may still go on to get the attention of draft scouts without actually ever getting some of the big stats that's associated with that. When it comes to what we typically expect big time NFL type players to be doing at the college level. One more thing before we're done on today's show on a completely different topic. In addition to getting ready for Georgia and the Peach Bowl on Friday, we're also watching something else happening in downtown Atlanta over the course of the next couple of days, and that's the state championship high school football playoff games. And there's obviously a lot of really good ones. The one I have my attention on today is at 3:30 this afternoon when Brock Vandegrift and Prince Avenue takes on Trinity Christian for the Class A private school state championship. It's been a really good senior year for the Georgia signee Vandegrift, and one more chance to see him. The game's going to be on Georgia Public Television today, so you'll get a chance to see him once again. And I think all of a sudden the Georgia quarterback situation just feels very different, right? You've got JT Daniels, who you feel is very entrenched coming back, I would say, is the starting quarterback for next season. But the succession plan behind him with Vandegrift, I think suddenly makes you feel just a lot more. It just makes you feel like the Georgia quarterback situation is much more stable than it was before, and the state championship game today is another chance for Vandegrift to illuminate and illustrate that. And he recently talked to our Jeff Sintel and told Jeff how excited he was for a chance to bring home a state title to his school there in Athens. This is Brock Vandegrift.
It's an amazing feeling. I can't even describe it, honestly. Me and my dad have dreamed about this for forever, and to be able to bring it to Prince is something special. I think this is the second time that we've been to the state championship in the whole history of Prince Avenue. I believe we got a little better odds than we did last time. I think they got blown out last time by Elka, so we're looking forward to it.
This is a really good interview. You should go watch it with Jeff Sintel there on the DawgNation video channels. And obviously I've got my own father on my mind right now, but can you imagine if you're Brock Vandegrift's dad, who's the coach there at Prince Avenue, a chance to win a state championship with your son and having watched all the stuff that he's gone through this year and the success that he's enjoyed? There's no telling how much fun that must be for both Vandegrift's father and son there. So make sure you check that out this afternoon. Obviously, DawgNation's rooting for Brock, and certainly excited about seeing him put a great cap to what has been a great senior year for him and a very bright future coming at the University of Georgia there as well. I'll also say this, 7 days from right now, next Monday, Eddie, the unofficial mascot of DawgNation Daily, the blind squirrel, will return. We're going to debut a brand new Gator Hater segment. Eddie's going to be a part of that. So 7 days from now, Eddie is back. I'll see you again tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Have a great day, everybody. And on video, good to be saying that again, and good to have all of you with us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, as we roll into our R.S. Andrews cool down. Of course, R.S. Andrews, you can trust them for your air conditioning, your heating, your plumbing, electric needs. It's been cold lately, like legitimately cold, and nothing worse than the holiday season if your furnace is not keeping your house as warm as it should. So if you've got any fears or concerns about that, whether it be not working right now or maybe some concern that it won't be working by the end of the winter, get some peace of mind. Get your system tuned back up to factory fresh specs so you'll get that toasty warm feeling here during this holiday season and for the rest of the winter there as well, online at rsandrews.com. And we're just going to dive in here and take a bunch of comments, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts, feelings on everything going on around UGA. You can certainly share those with us right now. Jay Shipe says Eddie needs a makeover. Eddie's looking forward to coming back, and hopefully we're going to have some fun with that here coming up pretty good. Silent Chaos, looking forward to seeing Brock. This is on YouTube, by the way. Seeing Brock Vandegrift in the state title game. I'm excited about that. Very, very excited about that. Frank Patterson, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. Yeah, Christmas, I think, came at a good time. And, you know, on the one hand, there's obviously great sadness that my father was, we weren't able to celebrate, with him. But at the same time, one of the things I'm a big believer in is that life runs on parallel tracks, that you have not good times and bad times, but often good and bad things happening at the same time. Obviously, the situation with my father was a terrible thing and something that has made me very sad, but simultaneous to that, I've got a beautiful family and the magic of Christmas in your kids' eyes, and I really found myself able to lean into that to provide comfort for the other. And that's just kind of the way that life is. It's good and bad happening at the same time, and somehow we try to process all of it. And it's not always easy to do, but that really is what life is. Anthony White says, I know I didn't get a chance to talk about early signing day. Quick thought about that. I was really happy. I mean, I think that Xavier Sorey, when you look at the way that he's, climbed the ranks here, towards the end of the process, I mean, I think that Sorey has a real chance to be a major player at Georgia. And that was the big, early signing day firework, I guess, if you will. I think that all things being equal, Georgia did its job. I mean, listen, someone like me is always leaning in closely to see what a Mason Smith's going to do, and, leaning in closely to see what, some of these other big names might do, even though on that front, Donovan Edwards, Mason Smith ended up being a little bit of a quiet day, to pull Sorey there late in the process was a very big deal for Georgia. I will say that it is certainly eye-opening to me to see the success that Alabama is having right now. That unfortunately for Georgia, who is doing everything it can to keep pace, and this program is operating, I would say, at certainly very close to an elite level, Alabama, with the big pull that it has again, they're not making things easy for Georgia right now. And I guess that's the way you should expect it to be there in the SEC. So I thought Georgia had a very successful signing day, very successful 2021 class, and it is certainly eye-opening how much success Alabama has enjoyed in recruiting. Nature Gator says, did I get a chance to watch the SEC championship game? Thoughts on that? Yeah, I mean, listen, I'll give Florida some credit for the way that it played there in that game. I thought that Florida had a very admirable showing. In fact, I'll go so far as to say this: I'm not surprised that the playoff selected Ohio State and Notre Dame. That's not a surprise. Probably not to any of us. But I do think one of the arguments I wish that more people would have made on television is, in fact, I don't think anyone made this argument, that if you look at Texas A&M, their best win, the one that came against Florida, was clearly better based on what happened at the end of the season. Florida playing Alabama close, Florida beating Georgia, and Georgia had been, a good team, at the end of the year, different kind of team. JT Daniels didn't play against Florida, but nonetheless, Florida beat Georgia. Florida played Alabama close. Texas A&M beat Florida. In other words, the best win for A&M got better based on how the final Saturday unfolded. Whereas Notre Dame's best win against Clemson clearly looks worse when you see how different Clemson is with Trevor Lawrence, quarterback, in place of DJ Uiagalelei, who himself is a very good quarterback, but clearly a totally different team with Trevor Lawrence. I'm not surprised that Notre Dame still got in, but I thought there was more room for that argument to be made that A&M's best win looks better now. I think that Notre Dame's best win looks worse now, and somehow that just never really got factored into the discussion. Jordan Harris looking forward to seeing some early enrollees around the bowl practices. Yeah, that's been kind of a fun, cool tradition the last couple of years to see some of that going on. So I'm pretty excited about that there as well. Clarence Dawson, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Mikey Watkins says he's excited about being at the game. Yeah, I'm glad that you're able to get those tickets. I've heard from some Georgia fans, Peach Bowl tickets this year were not easy to get. Georgia did not get a big allotment of them. And, secondary market stuff is out there, but this was not an easy ticket for a lot of people. Hugh Nash, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. And boy, it's so meaningful, Hugh, to hear you say, the connection that your father had to DawgNation. And I take that stuff very seriously. I've heard from so many of you who, such as yourself, who have connected with parents around that. My dad and I had a connection through DawgNation. He was very, I'm thankful to say, very proud to, support me on this, was always retweeting my stuff and sharing the shows and things like that. And when someone like you says that your dad was, that this meant something to him and now he lives on in your memory, that's something I do take really seriously. And I said this during the regular show, that it is easy for me to come on here, even though I don't talk about my personal life a ton, it's easy for me to come on here and say a tough thing that's happened in my family because so many of you have been so open about sharing your own situation there as well. I've always wanted this to be more than just content, right? This is more than just who's playing in the Peach Bowl and who's not, or, who's Georgia signing and who Georgia isn't. This is more than just the transactional nature of college football. This is really something that we do to bring us closer to other people, and sometimes those are our own fathers. And so I take that very seriously, and it is incredibly meaningful to me to understand all of that. So, Hugh, thank you for sharing what you shared. Let's get some more comments. Randy Hall, thank you. Jeff Ingram says, what does the, quote, show cause really mean? That's a good question. I actually am not an expert on exactly what that means, other than I need to look up the definition of that specifically. Obviously, Dan Mullen kind of dealt with that. The one thing that the Florida violation did bring to mind is go back and I've been thinking about Hugh Freeze a lot lately for obvious reasons. By the way, that game against Coastal the other night was one of the most fun bowl games for the good and bad reasons. But what a fun bowl game between Liberty and Coastal Carolina. And, a very good season for Freeze there at Liberty. I've been thinking a lot about him. Go back and reread a lot of the NCAA stuff related to Freeze at Ole Miss at the time. And obviously there was a lot of it, and Georgia can speak to this firsthand when it comes to Laramie Tunsil. But go back and look at the Leo Lewis, former Mississippi State linebacker, his involvement in all of this. It is very interesting to point out and to note that Mississippi State was not exactly blameless back in those days. And listen, who knows what's true and who knows what's not. But it's not exactly it's not exactly that Mississippi State was just pristine clean back in those days with Dan Mullen as coach. So important to keep that in mind, that this is not Mullen's first run-in with something like this. But, yeah, there you go. Epic Robinson, Malik Willis. Yeah, you talk about a guy that's turned out to be much better than I probably thought he was. Malik Willis is an example of that. Now, how much of that is just the great benefit of getting a chance to work with Hugh Freeze, and how much of that would have never come to fruition had Willis not played with Hugh Freeze? I think that's all a really good question. But what a performance for Willis in a Liberty uniform this year. Matt Rukavina, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Richard Sheffield says, who wants to go to a college in Starkville? Maybe that's just what it comes down to for sure. But you want to go back and just reread some of that stuff about, the ways in which, like in Leo Lewis's case, he was kind of used as a witness, I think, against Ole Miss. And there was just some very strange stuff there. Very, very strange. In light of some of the NCAA issues that Florida has dealt with, going back and rereading some of that stuff from Mississippi State is probably kind of interesting. Mary Justice says Tyson Campbell. Yeah, I think that there is still a large number of Georgia players who are, looking to who are looking to be a part of this game and play in this game. I know Campbell spoke with reporters here today. I just am not that stressed out about the opt-outs, even though I wish that they weren't happening. And I certainly agree with some of what John said today about, what it potentially means for the future of college football being a different kind of sport than we've loved about it in the past. But for the most part, I'm not that stressed out about it. Killian Worthy says that DawgNation Daily is therapy for me. It always has been. Always has been. There's been a lot of things. 2020 has been a hard year for a lot of people. And there is a lot of comfort that I have taken from being able to speak into this microphone and connect with you. And this particular part of the show, maybe as much as anything, the two-way conversation that we get back and forth. I'd go crazy without this. I really would. Now, my wife might tell you that I'm halfway there as it is. But yeah, I mean, this is a definite valuable release for me. Barbara Stickner, thank you so much for the kind words. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Chris Sapp, excited about 2021. I'm right there with you on that. Very excited about that. Scott Gentry, thank you. I really appreciate that. You guys, that means a lot to me. That is not something I take for granted. Tennille Calvino, that's right. Georgia Public Television is the spot for the state championship games. Really, I'm excited about all of them. I just like high school football in Georgia, whether it's a Georgia prospect or not. There's some really good games for the course of the next couple of days. Our buddy Matt Stewart going to be calling a lot of those for GPB. So yeah, I think that's a really fun thing. Really fun thing. David King says, do I think that Muschamp will come to Georgia to be defensive coordinator? I don't know about that. First of all, I think that Georgia's got a defensive coordinator it's pretty happy with right now. I'm not really sure what Muschamp's future holds. I did hear the rumor, I'm sure many of you did as well, that Derek Mason was interested in the LSU job. I was a little bit surprised about that. But so it sounds like Mason has been at least rumored to be connected to a job, but I'm not sure what Muschamp's future holds right now. Mitch Marchman, thank you. Yeah, Mitch saying that we've never met personally, but you do feel like you get to know people, and I feel very much the same way. That I hope that you feel like you know me through connecting to the show. That's always been my hope and my wish. I've never been that interested, and I'm not saying this is a bad career choice, but I'm not that interested in reporting on the news. That's never been my thing. I'm not a reporter, and I have great respect for people who are reporters. Please understand that, but that's never been my thing. The only thing that I really want to do in life is provide people, much the same way somebody said before that DawgNation Daily keeps me from going crazy. I want to be able to provide that for other people as well. So whether you're at work or you're working out or you're, I don't know, some of you listen to the show right before you go to sleep. Whatever anybody does to connect with the show, I just want to be that daily habit for people, that daily connection to something fun. And we do try to keep the show as fun as we possibly can. And, I hope that you feel like you get to know me through that process. Thank you, Terry. I appreciate that. Charlotte Gravitt, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Let me go back over to YouTube just for a minute. Noah Sheldon says that Muschamp and Harbaugh yelling at each other on the sideline would be must-watch TV. Yeah, sure, it would be for sure. Colby Curry, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. DogFan3 says, do you think UGA subs too much? P.S. I don't think we do. DogFan3, I'll be very candid with you on this. At times, I think they do, but I would also admit to being a hypocrite on this because in this situation, for a guy like Jermaine Johnson, who maybe hasn't gotten enough stats, maybe gotten enough playing time, I think it's very easy to say, well, Georgia just subs too much. And I have talked about this on the show before that I think at some point in time, Georgia's going to have to identify one of these guys who can be a superstar and put him out there and let him do it. Cultivate that superstar player. That's the kind of guy that can really help you, like Roquan did in 2017. When you get into a tough spot, like a Florida this year or an Alabama this year, that superstar player can get you out of that tough jam. Roquan did that plenty for Georgia back in 2017. So in the confines of this conversation, yeah, I'll say Georgia probably subs too much. You could have said the same thing about wide receiver before, too. Georgia subbed less at receiver this year, but maybe in 2019 that constant rotation of receivers was a little bit of a problem. But here's where my hypocrisy would come in. Let's say that instead of Jermaine Johnson transferring because he's not, playing as much as he wants, let's say it's a player who's transferring because he's not going to really play much at all. Well, at that point in time, you almost wish you could rotate a little bit more to keep that guy happy. Ultimately, I think that Smart is really good at something that's not that easy to do. A very talented roster of players, unprecedented depth at outside linebacker and positions like that, a very talented roster. Smart, for the most part, keeps a lot of people, I'd say, pretty happy. I mean, I hear things from time to time. Some of you probably do as well. Not everybody's going to be just happy-go-lucky, sunshine and lollipops all the time. These are all competitive players. No one's playing as much as they want to play. Every now and then I'll bump into a parent or something like that, and they'll express a little bit of frustration here and there, but that's not unusual. That's just the kind of thing that's going to be going on at every college football program. That's just the way things go. But for the most part, Smart does a pretty good job of keeping a large number of players pretty happy with the amount of playing time that they're getting, and that is not easy to do. And I think that he should be commended for that, even though I'll say on one side of my mouth, I understand Jermaine Johnson probably wants to be a superstar, maybe at a place like Florida State where they'll just let him go out there and be a hero in every single play. Maybe he will have a happier, better year for doing that. If I was a player as talented as Johnson, I might want that for myself. But, apart from that, I think that Smart has done a pretty good job of roster management here at Georgia. And if guys like Azeez Ojulari go on to draft success, then you can say, hey, my system is working here. There's a lot of secondary guys who, that's also a crowded position where guys have had to wait for their chance to play. And, there's a lot of rotating that goes on there. You're about to have a bunch of those guys also get drafted too over the course of the next couple of years. And, once again, Smart can say, hey, you're not a superstar. You weren't really doing, superstar type stuff at Georgia, but you're getting paid like one at the next level as a first-round draft pick rookie. And ultimately, that's probably what matters more than anything else. I mean, even for a guy like, DeAndre Baker, who was the Thorpe Award winner at Georgia, first-round pick for the New York Giants, even he was kind of a player in a system at Georgia. I think that Georgia's probably only had the one player that's kind of transitioned above the system. That was obviously Roquan. It kind of reminds you of the old, if you're old enough to remember, I'm not old enough to remember Michael Jordan in college, but I'm old enough to remember what was said about Michael Jordan in college, which was that Dean Smith was the only coach in the history of basketball to hold Jordan low to fewer than 30 points a game. That Smith wanted Jordan to be a part of a system, even though he was a player that could potentially transcend that system. And to a degree, maybe Georgia's doing some of the same stuff with some of its guys right now, putting them in a system, and that's a system that rotates playing time. But ultimately, if the draft spot's where it's supposed to be, then what you did or didn't do, statistically speaking, in college, maybe that doesn't matter all that much. Jalen Jackson says, if Campbell leaves, give me your 2 starting corners plus starting safety for 2021. Well, obviously, I'm hoping Keely Ringo is in the mix on that. I'm definitely hoping for that. And I can understand why Campbell would leave. I've seen some, mock drafts that have him, rated pretty favorably. I think that Tyreek Stevens is a player you're going to hear from in a very big way next year. Silent Chaos says that Stevenson hasn't shown that speed on the football field. I don't know. I think you see some pretty interesting, athleticism from Stevenson from time to time. Go back to last year when he was utilized as a pass rusher. You got to be pretty speedy to get off that, off that corner blitz, and he was doing some of that kind of stuff pretty good as well. Frank Patterson says, any word on a Rick Gilbert? To my knowledge, there is no new news on Gilbert. He's not officially in the transfer portal as of right now. I believe it's just an opt-out at the moment, but this may be one of those situations where no news is good news. You better believe on this show, it's going to be a Rick Gilbert Nation Daily. Post Cincinnati and the Peach Bowl, we're going to be all on the Rick Gilbert watch. And listen, I think that Georgia's as much a part of that as anybody is, if I had to guess. Green Soldier says, first of all, thank you for the kind words. I certainly appreciate that. And he says, when am I going to come out with my prediction for the game? I don't have a good prediction yet. Anything I said now would probably be just a little bit of a guess. I do expect Georgia to play well. Let me hold off a little bit, though, before I make any kind of specific prediction on this. Chandler Johnson says, has Jordan Davis been spotted at bowl practice? Davis was one of the ones meeting with reporters today. Yeah, so Davis met with reporters today, so that's a really good sign there. You don't put somebody in a meeting like that who's not at least trying to play. So yeah, I would say that's a pretty good sign there on that. John Adams says, what's my oldest memory with my dad watching a game? So I said this to some folks not too long ago, that my grandfather, my father's father, had season tickets. And, a lot of you complain about the noon games now. Well, my grandfather was one of the people who complained about anything that wasn't. Back then it was a 1 p.m. game. That was Georgia's common game time when it wasn't playing a TV game. And when I was a kid growing up in the mid-'80s, kind of post-Herschel, not every game was on television. That Georgia played a lot of games at 1 p.m., but there are always a couple of times a year when Georgia would play a later game, a 3:30 game maybe, or a 4:30 game. It seems like they were back then, 7:30 from time to time. And my grandfather did not want to go to those night games. Just, a lot of grandfathers just don't like those, games, later than the 1 p.m. You just get back home too late. We lived in Gainesville, Georgia. And so my dad would take us to like the Tennessee game. I remember that one in 1988, or the Auburn game, a game that Georgia lost in 87 there in Athens. An LSU game kind of comes to mind. Those like big games, mid-'80s, grandfather's tickets, but my dad taking us to the game was such a big deal for a kid. And Georgia was not always winning those games back then. That was not a great era for Georgia in big game wins, but to be there at the game, to be there with my dad, one of my great memories. So thank you so much for asking that. Scott Pete, on the subject of Wilson, the BYU quarterback, very impressive player. It's late, y'all. We got to go. Let me go back over to Facebook just really, really quick. Chris Slim White on Ringo playing the bowl game. My understanding is that he's still not available. James Leonard Brown said, I heard Davis might stay. I've seen that rumor online. I don't know what to say about that right now. My guess is that Davis probably gets assuming he's healthy, he would get a fairly favorable draft grade. But gosh, I think he's Georgia's most important defensive player. I'd love for him to come back. Randy Hall says, will we get a B.A. Chortle if we get a Rick Gilbert? You better believe that. Gilbert, for me, I think the kids call it standing. I'm a huge Rick Gilbert stan, and I always have been. Randy Hall says, is LeCount playing? I think he's going to try to play. This is where I have to try to hold off on being the Grinch that stole Christmas, because what we're doing with LeCount now is almost exactly the same thing we did with DeAndre Swift last season. I think Swift played, one play in the Sugar Bowl, something along those lines. Something tells me that we're doing something similar with Richard LeCount right now, but listen, I'm all about the theater, if nothing else. So I got no problem with that all the way around. Jarvis Hanna, good to see you. J.D. Minton, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Y'all, it's fun to be here. Tennille Calvino says, yeah, it's classic BA to be kind of doing the false starts on the way out the door as I try to say goodbye and then take more comments. I am going to go for now, though. I'm excited about this week. It is so good to be back. Thank you all for making it easy to transition back into the chair here again. By the way, first time in the studio for us in a long time, so that's kind of cool, too. Thanks for being here as part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Y'all check them out online, rsandrews.com. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, they can replace it for you the same day. Just find them online at rsandrews.com. Have a great, great day. Tomorrow morning, back here again, 10 a.m., DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. I'll look forward to talking to you then, everybody. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.